Hello everybody. I wanted to talk a minute about compound cooling compressors. There's been several questions here lately on how to do an efficiency check on them. So I wanted to cover that and kind of point out some stuff. Now, one thing everybody needs to know on a compound cooling compressor, you can't, like a traditional compressor, shut off the suction here and try to run it into a vacuum. One thing you need to understand is the suction gases will come in here, and then it splits and it goes to half the cylinder head. And then, so the bottom side of this is the suction, the top side of this is the discharge. Now, on the low stage of this gas, and let's just say it's about 10 psi coming in, you're going to have 10 psi coming in and approximately around 45, 50, could be 60 psi on the middle stage. This gas never enters the crankcase. So if you try to pull this into a vacuum, the only thing you're pulling into a vacuum is just basically the cylinder or the cylinder wall. You're not pulling the crankcase. So here's the way you have to test a compressor for efficiency. The first thing you have to do is you have to come to the Interstage Vows. In this scenario, this is a Kaiser rack. If you can look right here, you got ball valves. You're gonna have a ball valve here, and every compressor is gonna have one. On a Phoenix rack, you may see like a little king valve or a little service valve right here that you can close off. In order to do this test, you have to close off the inner stage, leave the compressor running, it does not hurt it, leave suction discharge open as normal, just come through and close off the inner stage valve on every compressor. Once you've got them all shut off, then what I want you to do is do an interstage test. Now, come down here on this one right here on compressor number 1. If you will look, a lot of people have never paid any attention to this. On a small body compressor, if you will look at the cylinder head, you will see an L and you will see an M on this scenario. This is the low side, which I was telling you about. Suction gas comes into the low, discharge out the medium. On a lot of the small bodies, you don't have a good port that will read the crankcase pressure. This M right here, this port, gives you your crankcase pressure. So you can take, once you get all the inner stage closed off on all of them, you can take your crankcase pressure reading here. Or same thing on the top dead center head, you got a low and a medium, but most of the time you have a port right here. So just be aware it says M. So once you go through, you take your pressure readings, you try to keep your suction pressure on the rack the same at all times. So you will come through and check your pressure reading. Now here's what you're looking for. Same thing on a situation where you have a low load situation, the suction pressure is going to be lower than normal. And if you have a situation where the load is higher, your pressure is going to be higher than normal. So let's just say we came down through here and we did pressure readings on all these compressors. So for this illustration, let's just say you come down through here, and this one we had, let's just say 20 psi, and we came here and we had 45 psi, and this one right here, it's going to be hard to write on it because it's wet. I'm going to say 45 psi, and this one right here, let's just say we had 90 psi. Well, looking at all the pressure readings, you can already tell the 2 in the middle is going to be our baseline. So we should be trying to get around 45. So now going back to compressor number 1, that's 20. That's telling me that the inner stage pressure is lower than normal. That's telling me that there's low load. Both of these heads here are your 2 low side heads. If that pressure is lower than all the rest, you've got something going on with your low side plates. So we need to take them off and investigate the plates and see what's going on. Now, going to the other end, If you'll come down here, you can see this one's reading 90. If that one is reading 90 and all the others are reading 45, that's saying something is going on the discharge side of this plate. This plate right here, the one all the way to the right, is your discharge, where we go from the middle stage to the discharge. If this plate is blowing by, what you're doing is you're dumping discharge gas back into the crankcase, which is going to cause your interstage to be higher than normal. So that's one thing you need to look at when you're checking your interstage. I'll tell you another thing, a little tip. If this one is messed up, it can cause a neighboring compressor to have oil failures. So what you have to do is kind of get this one fixed, and then I have seen it get this one fixed, and it can change the other number beside it and kind of give you a new normal baseline. So that's how you test and do an efficiency check. One other thing I'm going to touch on before I let you go is the interstage portion of these compressors. They have to have load on them. A lot of people on these older style compressors or these older racks think that the subcooler is really not that important. You really need to keep the subcooler working, because you will notice that the outlet of the subcooler ties into the interstage header. And if you will come right over here, you will see here's the subcooler here. There's the EPR valve for the subcooler, and it ties right into the interstage. What this does is that subcooler keeps a load on the interstage portion of this rack. It has to have that. On a Hill Phoenix rack, there is another valve, which I've always called a interstage pressure valve. And what will happen is, if the interstage pressure gets below, let's say 45 psi, that valve will start to open and will dump discharge gas into that interstage just to keep pressure on it. So we need to make sure that you have a load, make sure your subcoolers are working. The last thing I'm going to touch on is the Y10 valve. A lot of people may not be familiar with what they are. This valve right here, that is your Y10 valve. Let me get the light off of it so you can see it a little better. The purpose of that is to inject liquid refrigerant into the suction portion of the compressor. It's got a bulb that comes across, and it comes and it ties to the discharge line of the compressor. The way it operates is that when the discharge temperature of the discharge line gets up to 190 degrees, that valve starts to open. By the time it gets to 210, it should be fully open. That is another way to try to keep the temperature on these compressors down. So maybe that will help out and kind of explain how to do an efficiency check on these compressors. One little tip that I have learned is I've learned to try to do like a quick field test too. If you come down here and feel on the bottom side of this head, it should be warm, but it should not be scalding hot and make you jerk your hand back. The same as when you touch the belly of this compressor, it should be warm. It should not be scalding hot. If that compressor is scalding hot, you've got problems in that compressor. Either you've got blow by, or Y10 valve might not be working, something you may need to investigate. So hopefully this puts a little bit of clear understanding on how to do an efficiency check. I hope it helps, and good luck out there. Have a good day.